All right, so let's dive right in today, exploring tattoos. How they're perceived and what they might say about mental health, especially.
Really fascinating area, I think.
Totally. We've got a stack of research articles to help unpack all this. And some of this stuff, seriously mind-blowing. We'll be looking at historical and cultural perspectives, modern biases, and even how this plays out in counseling.
Yeah, it's going to be quite a journey.
It is. Okay, so first things first. What does the word tattoo even mean? It seems like, well, everyone has one these days.
Right. Well, it actually comes from the Samoan word tatau.
Okay.
It means to tap lines on the body. Pretty descriptive.
It is. It makes you think about the artistry, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Okay.
Speaking of intentionality, did you know tattoos date back as far as 7000 BC?
No way! Really?
Yeah, like ancient Egyptian mummies with ink.
Wow, that's so wild. What were they getting back then? Like little pyramids?
Well, we don't know exactly what those early tattoos depicted, but they definitely weren't just for fashion. Tattoos in ancient cultures often held deep cultural and spiritual significance,
Right, right.
like Otzi the Iceman. Around 3000 BC, researchers believe his tattoos might have been therapeutic, like a very early form of acupuncture.
So, like, using tattoos to heal the body, that's fascinating.
Yeah. And before European colonization, many indigenous cultures used tattoos to mark big milestones, like reaching adulthood or to show tribal affiliations or even social status.
It's amazing how something as personal as a tattoo can also be this symbol of belonging.
You really speak to the multifaceted nature of tattoo.
It does. But then, well, things get a little complicated, right? European colonization brought this pushback against tattoos, often rooted in, well, religious beliefs.
Yeah, unfortunately, colonization often led to the suppression of indigenous practices, and tattoos were no exception.
Right.
In many parts of the world, tattooing was discouraged or even completely outlawed because it clashed with the colonizers' religious views.
It's a reminder of how cultural clashes can really impact people's lives and traditions. But, well, tattoos didn't disappear, right? They're actually having this huge resurgence all over the world, even in places where they were once condemned.
It's quite a phenomenon. I think it speaks to their enduring power as self-expression and cultural identity. Despite the attempts to suppress them, tattoos have persisted, they've evolved, taken on new meanings, and become more popular than ever.
It's like a comeback story, almost.
Exactly. It really shows how resilient this practice is and how deeply it resonates with people across cultures and generations.
And speaking of cultures, the diversity of tattoo traditions around the world is incredible. Like in India, you have these unique patterns specific to different tribal regions, now blending with Western influences, especially in urban areas.
Yeah, it's fascinating to see how globalization is shaping the art of tattooing. That in Samoa, you have the pia tattoos for men and malu for women. Really intricate. They signify the transition into adulthood, carry a lot of cultural weight.
It's amazing how tattoos can be deeply personal, but also these visual markers of shared identity.
It really is. And it's not just personal or cultural either. Even the legal world is grappling with the significance of tattoos. There are cases debating intellectual property rights of indigenous tattoo designs, which raises questions about appropriation and respect.
Wow, it's like when fashion brands use indigenous patterns without permission. Now it's happening with tattoos.
Yeah, you got it. It highlights that even something as personal as a tattoo can have complex legal and ethical dimensions, especially when it comes to protecting cultural heritage.
It's pretty wild how something so personal can become, this battleground for cultural ownership. But okay, let's shift gears a bit. We've talked about history, culture, even legalities, but what about the bias against tattoos? The elephant in the room. It's something you're interested in, right?
Yeah, definitely relevant, especially with how mainstream tattoos have become.
Right. I mean, nearly half of U.S. adults between 18 and 34 have at least one tattoo. The industry's booming, over $1 billion annually.
Yeah.
But still, people judge.
Yeah, you're right. There's this disconnect between the growing popularity and, well, the lingering negative perceptions, especially towards women and people of color.
It's like society hasn't quite caught up, and this bias shows up in all sorts of ways, right?
It does, yeah. We see it in workplaces where qualified people might get passed over for jobs because of their ink or this pressure to cover up, even tattoos that have deep meaning, cultural significance.
It's like they're being judged on appearance rather than skills. And for women, it's even more complicated. There's this whole layer of judgment like, attention-seeking or promiscuous just because they have tattoos.
Yeah, exactly. It's a classic example of double standards, like
Right.
their bodies are constantly being policed and tattoos become this lightning rod.
And it's not just workplaces, right? You mentioned law enforcement. Kind of unsettling that something as personal as a tattoo could be used in a criminal justice context.
Unfortunately, there's research suggesting bias exists even within the legal system. Studies have shown that people with visible tattoos, particularly neck tattoos, they might be perceived more negatively. And this can influence things like sentencing, even the charges they face.
It makes you wonder how much unconscious bias plays a role. It's a reminder that even in systems that are supposed to be impartial, these personal judgments can creep in.
Absolutely. It raises serious questions about fairness and how we ensure people are treated equally, regardless of appearance.
All right, so we've talked about historical context, cultural significance, the biases, the legal stuff, but let's get to what you're really curious about, the link between tattoos and mental health. Complicated topic, right? For a long time, there was this assumption that tattoos were a sign of rebellion or even mental instability.
Right, yeah. Thankfully, we've moved past those outdated views. Modern research gives us a much more nuanced picture. Just having a tattoo is not inherently linked to mental health issues.
Makes sense. After all, people get tattoos for all sorts of reasons. Self-expression, honoring loved ones, commemorating events. It can be a positive, even therapeutic experience.
Right. It's about understanding the individual's story, the meaning behind their tattoos, not just the ink itself.
So it's about the why.
Exactly. But of course, it's not always that simple. There are nuances. The number, placement, even the content can sometimes provide additional insights.
Okay, so it's not black and white. Lots of gray area.
Right. For instance, some studies have found that folks with multiple visible tattoos or tattoos with potentially offensive content, they might be more likely to report certain mental health challenges. But then again, other studies show that tattooed individuals often report higher self-esteem, greater sense of personal power, even lower anxiety.
It's like the research is telling us two different stories. You can't make sweeping generalizations about tattooed people, right?
Exactly. We need to be careful about jumping to conclusions. Avoid making assumptions about someone's mental state just based on their tattoos.
And there's this other big misconception, the idea that tattoos are a form of self-harm. Like, getting a tattoo is no different from cutting. I remember hearing that a lot.
Thankfully, research has debunked that. While some people who self-harm might also have tattoos, the vast majority get them for entirely different reasons. It's about expression, art, commemoration, not about pain.
It's important to make that distinction. Self-harm is serious, not to be confused with tattooing.
Absolutely. And so many examples challenge those stereotypes, like trauma survivors using tattoos to symbolize healing, resilience, or the semicolon tattoo. It's this emblem of hope continuing after a difficult chapter.
And descendants of Holocaust survivors who get their relatives' number tattoos replicated to remember, honor their history. It's moving to see something meant to dehumanize become a symbol of survival, connection.
Powerful examples, yeah. They show the potential for tattoos to be used in positive, meaningful ways. It's turning pain into art, reclaiming ownership, expressing your story.
Taking control, saying, this is who I am, this is my story.
Exactly. And that leads us to the question, why? Why do people get tattoos? What are the underlying motivations?
Let's dive into that. There are all sorts of theories, right?
There are. Some older theories, like the psychodynamic theory, saw tattoos as outward signs of inner conflict, deviance, a very Freudian interpretation, people getting tattoos to deal with unconscious stuff.
Seems outdated now, kind of judgmental.
You're right. Modern research has moved beyond that. We recognize people's motivations are more complex, more varied.
So what are some of the other theories? This idea of the body as a canvas, for example.
Right, that's the human canvas theory. We have this inherent drive to express ourselves symbolically, and our bodies become the canvas.
I like that. It really captures the artistic side of it.
Exactly, turning your body into a living work of art.
Okay, cool. But what about those who say people just get tattoos to stand out, to attract attention? Any truth to that?
Well, there's the upping the ante theory. It takes an evolutionary perspective. Argues that in a competitive world, people, especially men, might use tattoos to stand out, attract mates, like peacocks with their feathers.
So, signaling attractiveness, individuality to potential partners. Interesting, but doesn't that feel a bit superficial? We've been talking about deeper meanings, personal and cultural.
Absolutely. That's why we need a more nuanced perspective. Based on our research, we propose a new theory. We call it the unencumbered self theory.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
It suggests tattoos can be a deliberate assertion of autonomy. It's about taking ownership, expressing freedom from societal norms and expectations.
So not just self-expression, but self-determination.
Precisely. Pushing back against societal pressures, reclaiming control.
Power.
And there's research to back this up. Studies have shown that women, particularly in cultures with restrictive norms, often use tattoos as a way to express their individuality, reclaim ownership of their bodies.
Makes sense. Asserting agency in a world that tries to limit their choices.
There's also research linking tattoos with the defiance of, well, patriarchal authority, rejecting traditional roles and expectations visually.
I'm not going to conform to your idea of what a woman should be.
Exactly. And tattooed people are statistically less likely to belong to religious groups or strictly conform to norms.
Creating their own path, challenging the status quo.
You got it. And this unencumbered self theory aligns perfectly with current trends in counseling.
Really? How so?
Well, there's this growing emphasis on integrative approaches, narrative therapy, relational therapy, even art therapy. They recognize the importance of self-expression, encourage clients to explore their identities creatively.
So tattoos fit right into those frameworks as a form of self-expression.
Absolutely. They provide a visual representation of the client's story, their struggles, resilience, hopes, fears. It's all there.
Part of their narrative, part of who they are.
Exactly. And not just individual therapy either. The theory resonates with the interest in indigenous healing practices and the counseling field's embrace of a more collaborative approach to health.
Right, so many indigenous cultures have these rich tattoo traditions tied to spiritual beliefs, community values, healing.
It's crucial for counselors to recognize and respect those traditions.
This unencumbered self-theory really changes how we think about tattoos for individuals and for, well, mental health professionals.
It does, yeah. Challenges us to see past the stereotypes and see tattoos for what they are. Expressions of identity, resilience, autonomy.
So what's this mean for counselors? How should they approach working with clients who have tattoos?
Well, first things first, check those biases. A tattoo doesn't automatically mean someone's, troubled. It could be a sign of strength, a symbol of their journey, or just, how they choose to express themselves.
No jumping to conclusions.
Exactly. And open communication is key. Asking about visible tattoos during that initial session can build rapport, give you a glimpse into their story.
I see. I'm curious about what this means to you.
Right. And for counselors with tattoos, sharing their own experiences when appropriate can create a connection.
Normalizing it, recognizing it as part of their identity.
Yeah. Counselors can also help clients navigate, the realities of tattoo bias. We talked about the discrimination. It's important to acknowledge that.
Like helping them understand that while it's becoming more accepted, they still might face judgment.
Exactly. And helping them think through those challenges before getting a tattoo. Empowering them to make informed decisions.
Supporting them in finding that balance, self-expression, and navigating a world that's, well, not always so open-minded.
It is. And ultimately, meeting clients where they are, respecting their choices, helping them feel seen.
Well said. This has been an incredible deep dive into tattoos. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. It's amazing how something so seemingly simple can be so complex and fascinating.
It just goes to show there's always more to learn, and we should never stop questioning our assumptions.
That's what this is all about, right? Curiosity, critical thinking, understanding the world better.
Absolutely. So, as we wrap up, something to think about. What do you think drives the appeal of tattoos in a world that's constantly shaping how we see ourselves?
Is it about taking ownership of your body, expressing your individuality, connecting with heritage, or something else entirely?
Whatever the reason, it's clear tattoos have this power. They invite us to look deeper, consider the stories, beneath the ink. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive. Keep exploring, keep learning, and keep those minds open.